everybody. Welcome to your weekend restorative yoga class. Now, restorative yoga is meant to be very relaxing. The notion is that we're going to kind of give in to these poses. But sometimes our bodies are not as forgiving or as interested in giving in. So having some yoga props around you is very helpful. This is just a regular cotton blanket, so that is a good yoga prop, but if you've got a quilt or you've got another kind of blanket, they also work. You'll just fold it to the right size for you. If you want more than one blanket can be helpful, especially if you don't have a lot of the other kinds of yoga props. A couple of throw pillows or even some pillows from your bed can be useful. You might need a few of those because they're a little bit on the thinner side. And if you have yoga blocks, great, yoga blocks are awesome. If you don't have yoga blocks, even like an empty cardboard box that's taped up, or a Tupperware container with a lid on it. I've even seen people use an upside down sauce pot in place of a yoga block. So you can use some things like that to kind of give you some structure for the poses. Now, we're gonna be in the poses for a while. Most of the practices we're gonna do today live between 5 and 8 minutes per pose. And we're not looking for a really strong sensation of stretch. There might be a little sensation, but we're mostly interested in relaxing. So we put ourselves in these yoga poses, and then we're trying to let go of layers of tension and stress that we carry in the muscle in the body. So we're allowing the nervous system to really fully relax in an unusual or unique position. And that can be tricky, so if you find that you really cannot relax, it's okay to shuffle or move or adjust your posture. Spend the first minute getting into each pose, really adjusting and playing with it until it's pretty close to just right. And then if it, like, you know, with Goldilocks, if the porridge is no longer just right, like, you can move on to the next bowl, either come out of the pose and move around, or adjust your posture once again, okay? So we're gonna start with a butterfly pose, and we're gonna recline, we're gonna lie back. Now you can do this just laying on your back with enough support under your legs that the inner thigh is not too spicy or too intense. But you can also, if you've got some extra props, kind of prop your back up a little bit. I like to prop myself up so that I can get a little bit of a shoulder opening or shoulder stretch, but again, not too spicy. So I'm gonna go a little bit conservative. So I am gonna use a pillow today, but you could just as easily substitute a rolled up blanket in place of the pillow and put that underneath your back. We're gonna go longwise so that the spine is supported, and if you want your head elevated, you can either, if you've got extra props, you can put a block down and then put the pillow on so that the block is under your head, or you can pile up some blankets or throw pillows on top to make a little place for you to lie down. So I'm gonna lie down on this pillow. You could just as easily put a throw pillow in here from the couch or your bed, or a couple of those, or you can throw in a folded or rolled up blanket. Okay. Now, once you are in position, you're going to adjust the props so that they're just right. So often for me, the higher up I bring support for the butterfly, the less I feel that in my inner thighs. But for some of us, the prop might need to be right under the knee. Okay, and then in terms of with my back, depending on how firm the object is I've got underneath me, if I'm using something that's quite firm, I'm gonna want it right under my shoulder blades. If it's a little softer, then I might want it to go all the way down to the bottom of my rib cage, or even a little bit lower than that. And then you can allow the body to relax. And again, you might need to do like a little, like you might have to pick your pelvis up and kind of curl the tailbone in a little bit to help the low back smooth out. Sometimes it even helps to grab hold of a little bit of the flesh that's on your buttocks and kind of pull that down and out to the side so that there's not, it's not resisting the floor and arching the back too much. I find it also helpful to kind of tuck my shoulder blades underneath and get a little bit more of a sense of my arm bone dropping back into the shoulder blade. And then once you've done those little fiddles and adjustments, then let yourself relax. If anything is hanging out in space, it will be harder for your nervous system to let go. So if your elbows don't touch the ground, for example, you might build up some structure or throw in a couple of extra pillows so you've got something for your arms to rest on. Now we're going to stay with this pose for about 5 minutes more. So just allowing ourselves to relax and breathe for a moment. Now along the way you may find that after this, like the initial couple of minutes, that things settle a little bit. And it might be that that's the right point to do some minor adjustments. And then once you've gotten yourself once again settled, or if you've already just remained settled, we're going to pay attention to the breath in a relatively unique way. So we're going to notice the inhale as a downward moving force, so moving down towards the pelvis. And we're going to notice the exhale as an upward moving or lifting force upward. So inhale, allowing yourself to feel grounded and deep. And exhale, allow yourself to feel light. Just concentrating on this notion of a downward moving inhale and an upward moving exhale. We're going to come back to that notion of the breath if we've lost it, and we'll stay for about another 30 seconds here. Take a big breath. And we're just going to let the legs change first. So you can even use your hands to kind of help. And then I'm going to stay with the back support, but just straighten out my legs to begin with. And then just let the legs completely relax. I'm going to take a couple breaths there, and then I'll take this thing out from under my back. You can take your props out from under your back if you have them whenever you like. It's important to let ourselves transition nice and slow with the restorative practice so that we have a chance to kind of feel all of the sort of implications is the wrong word, but the sort of signature or the way that it sort of leaves us, right? So when I come off of the pillow and back onto my back, there's this kind of sense that my back has kind of spread out a little bit. If I use the blanket, sometimes I can feel the place where the blanket was under my back. And so we're just kind of noticing those things, the little kind of leftover impressions that the poses leave us with, so that we have a chance to bring some of our awareness a little more inside. And get some feedback from the tissue back to our brain. Now while we're here, we're going to do a side stretchy pose called the banana. And while we do this in yin yoga as well, we're going to be just a little more gentle with this pose with the restorative. So we're going to do the same exact thing. We're just not going to maybe go too far. So stretch yourself out nice and long, and then we're just going to gently curve a bit to the side. Now when I do yin, I like to really leave my arms stretched up over my head so that I get a little more sensation. But for the restorative practice, I bring the elbows down and I make sure that my head and neck kind of follow the pathway. And then I put a little support under my knees so that it's a little softer around the legs. You can do those things or not do those things. But once you've got like just the sense that you're sort of bending to one side, that's all we're really after here. And then we're going to just let time and gravity and our willingness to let go do all the work for us. So we'll stay here for a bit. We'll stay about 3 minutes on each side. Again, make sure that everything is comfortable and there's nothing really pulling or tugging really hard, so your nervous system doesn't have anything to get excited about. Calm nervous system. We're going to stay for 1 more minute here. we're going to take a nice big breath. Oh, hi. And then we're going to just meander our way back to the center. And I like to do a moment where I just relax for a second and feel. And just notice now, with having done something where one hemisphere of the body was slightly different than the other, if we talk about, going down the center point of the body, can you feel any differences between the side that was longer? For me, that was the left side, versus the side that was curled in, which in my case was the right. And I would swear to you that my left leg is now slightly longer than my right leg, and my right hip is actually smaller than my left hip. This is not true. If I put my hands here, they're exactly the same. But the sensation that's coming from my fascia back to my brain is suggesting that a shift has occurred. And this is one of the most important things to understand about these deeper and slower yoga practices, is that we don't really have to be especially pushy or forceful in order for the practice to yield a result or a sensation, right on? And so the sensation can be quite delicate and quite gentle, or the pose can be quite gentle, and yet we can still feel a shift. And so if we can kind of consider that's an interesting way to practice, and even though it might not be your favorite way, it is an interesting idea. And to kind of give ourselves permission to rest is really interesting, right? To do nothing for a period of time. Then the pose itself becomes a vehicle of meditation, because we're using the time that we're in the pose to really just let go of our agendas and let go of any notions that we have, and just be present in that shape. And if we go back to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, one of the statements in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika is that yoga should be practiced without intention or without agenda. They don't use the word agenda, but but the notion is that rather than go into the practice with some ideas of what's going to happen, instead you go into the practice with an openness to whatever does happen. And so if we can kind of get a sort of sense of being curious as we kind of let these poses rest our body and unfurl us, can we get curious of how that impacts us, not just physically, but also what does it do in terms of shifting our brain or shifting our emotional state. So I don't know what the answer's going to be. And again, we're going into this with no agenda, yogis, but we'll see what happens. So I've talked enough that hopefully you've had time to sort of integrate the work we just did and do the other side. So this is what I like about my lecture portions of our classes, is that it gives you guys time to do some little back massagey things. So if you're ready, we're going to stretch out and do the other side. And again, we're going to just start in a place where one side is longer than the other, so we've got a side bend. And then you're going to adjust and add props where you like them, so that there's a very gentle, very kind signature here to this pose. And we'll stay for a few minutes. Nothing is nagging us or calling attention to itself. So our nervous system has to pay attention to pain if we can help it. And if we can't help it and there's just a sensation in our body, maybe we deal with chronic pain, for example, support yourself as much as you can, and then allow yourself to, again, you might have to change, like maybe you have to put your feet on the ground instead of having your legs stretched out long, for example, if your low back is really cranky or it's hard to adjust it. But in any case, allow yourself to be present as sensations kind of unfurl, and anything that's causing you to tense up or to put your nervous system in that sort of alert state, definitely address. And then anything else that you can relax, like for example, if you could relax just your eyes or just your mouth, while you're dealing with those other sensations, that can at least become partially restorative, partially allow the nervous system to integrate whatever we're doing or whatever we're experiencing. Again, you're in charge of what's happening on your mat. So if you inherently realize you should do something different, or you have an instinctive a notion of something, go with that instinct. You don't have to go with my agenda even, that we're going to hold this pose. You can allow yourself to choose appropriate movement or appropriate postures for you. So we've got about our last 30 seconds here, yogis. Take a nice big breath, and then kind of drift back to the center. Again, taking just a moment to notice, like, what happened. How did your body absorb or interpret that information or that pose? And then allow yourself to have a little bit of movement. Now, we're going to come to a seated position next, but take your time, and if you wanted to do some little cat-cow kinds of shapes first, you can certainly do that. And I like to lay on my side for a minute. So if I were going to do the cat-cows, I would roll right onto the belly. But otherwise, you can kind of roll to your side, and as you're ready, sort of sit yourself up, letting your head kind of hang out with your shoulder until you're all the way upright. There's kind of natural inclination for it to come up. And the now that you're upright, just pause for a moment and notice where that landed you. If you're still doing some little cat-cow's cool, carry on with that until you're ready. And then come join us in a seated position. Now I'm going to gather a bunch of yoga props around me. I'm going to put a blanket underneath my knees. I tend to hyperextend at the knee, and so I already know that that's something that I should do for myself. For you, it might be appropriate to put like a blanket, folded blanket, or even two underneath your hips to elevate the hips a little bit so that your knees are a little lower than the hip, especially if during some yoga poses it feels like you have to fall backwards or you are pressed backwards. Elevating the hip can kind of help the hip adjust and your spine to sit more upright. And then if you've got some pillows or some blocks or some other things, you can have those nearby and handy in the event that you want to use them for headrest along the way. Now, I'm going to start with a cross-legged position, so it's relatively simple. We're going to do a little bit of work just to kind of lengthen out these muscles in the front and back of the neck. Necks are delicate and need to be treated with respect. There's a lot of nerves that come out of our brain and go through the neck, especially between the collarbone and the shoulder blade and the arm bone is a lot of nerve endings and main vessels like the carotid artery, the jugular, and other things that come out of this area. So we don't want to be pinchy or too aggressive with the neck. We always want to be kind. We're going to try to focus on, we're going to do a little bit of movement, but we're going to try to focus on these surface muscles that hold the head on the spine. So the sensation may not be huge, but we're just going to be kind, okay? And we're just going to lengthen out these muscles that kind of help hold our head in place. So first, allow yourself to find a seated position where your spine feels upright and relatively free of torque. So again, that might mean I sit up on a blanket or a pillow. And then let your chin fall forward and notice what happens. And you may notice, do the shoulders want to round forward with you? Can you let the shoulder blades relax more down the back without pulling on them? Can they simply be allowed to drop? And then notice if the left side or the right side feels different. Is there a different layer or level of tension on either side of that? And then essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let my head sort of lull over so the ear comes close to the shoulder on one side, and then I'm going to lull over the other side. Now, being mindful and gentle and kind. I don't roll around all the way to the back because I find it a little pinchy for the neck vertebrae. But if that feels good to you and you don't have any notion or concern that you might have any disc problems with your vertebral discs in your neck, then you're welcome to do whatever you think is right for you. I'm going to just go side to side so that I more stay with the bigger muscle and stay out of those vertebrae a little bit. And it also clues me in a little better on where the tension is between these big muscles. Is the right side a little more tighter as the left? So I can tell you that my right side is the tight side. So when I get back to the middle and I'm even on both sides, I'm going to take my head and just let it float right back up. And then I'm going to focus on my right side first to let that side go, and then I'll do the left side just for balance. So the first muscle that I'm going to stretch is this muscle called the sternocleidomastoid, and understand that we can't isolate muscles in yoga. Everything in that general area is going with us, but we're going to, that's our target zone. How's that? This muscle connects the back, the skull right behind the jaw to the collarbone. And so we're going to just take those 2 points, the back of the ear and the collarbone, away from each other. So to do that, I'm going to take my head a little backwards and to the left, and I'm going to pull my collarbone down to the right. And so that's all I need to do to create that stretch. And again, it doesn't need to be big sensation for it to be impactful. As we've already seen with the restorative poses, even the littlest bit of sensation can create a change. And usually for me, neck muscles are quick to respond. So as soon as I get some tension there, the tissue starts to let go and it gets softer and a little bit easier. For you, it gets gets sharp, please back off. Again, we want a healthy level of respect for areas of our body where there are a lot of nerves, veins, arteries, that sort of thing. One might ask, where in the body is there not all of that? Good point. All right, so I'm gonna float my head back up, and then just notice, just having stretched that one muscle, can I feel a difference? And for me, I do. I feel a little bit of a sense that the front of my chest is a little lower on that side than the other. So now I'm gonna do same side but the other muscle, and this muscle connects the back of my skull on the little ridge near the bottom to my shoulder blade. So I'm gonna take the back of my skull away from my shoulder blade. So I'm gonna take my skull, or my head, to the left and forward, and I'm gonna take my right shoulder blade down and to the right. So I can stretch that guy. That's the levator scapulae muscle, and I might not be pronouncing that correctly, but you get the idea. It's called that because it lifts the scapula, the shoulder blade. Yay! So if we pull it the other way, we get a good stretch. And again, within a few breaths, usually 3 or 4 for me, I can automatically start to feel that softening. If I feel a fight, I back off. Take one more breath. And then I'm just going to relax my shoulder blade and then let my head float back up. And for me, a little bit of movement in the shoulders is often easier on me than moving my neck right away, but you can move either. And then just pause for a moment and see if it feels different. And again, if I put my hands here, there's not a difference, but it feels like my right side is lower or a little more relaxed. So I'm gonna do the same thing, same order, but on the left side. So to get this muscle in the front, I'm gonna let my head go back and to the right, and I'm gonna take my collarbone down and to the left. You can reach the arm out if that helps you get there. Again, we're working on the diagonal with these two muscles, so there's less likelihood that we're going to cause trouble for our discs, but your discs might be unique. If you've been in a car accident or something like that, and there's herniations or problems with your discs in areas that are not common from just regular, like using a computer, for example, then you may need to make very different adjustments and arrangements for yourself here. So I'm going to do one more big breath because that is starting to feel really lovely and light. And then I'm going to bring my collarbone back and then let my head come back. Again, just noticing if I feel any sort of shift there. And then I'm going to do the muscle that's in the back, that's a complementary muscle, so I want to take my head forward and to the right, and my shoulder blade down and to the left a bit. I like to do these neck releases really almost every day, at least somewhere down the road, because it feels nice. Because many of us are kind of quarantining, and all of our experience or contact with the outside world is coming through our phones or our computers. If that's the case for you, we're spending more time on those devices, and so the neck needs a little extra love. So I'm going to let myself float my shoulder blade back first, and then my head, and then notice how it feels. And generally it makes it feel like I actually have a neck. Most of the time I feel like my head rests directly on my shoulders. So I like that feeling of actually having a neck. Okay, so we're going to stretch the legs out, and we're going to do, essentially we're going to do a forward bending posture. But your version of this forward bending posture is largely dependent on how your body appreciates or doesn't appreciate forward bends. Now you can go, in terms of the leg position, anywhere between Paschimottanasana, which is where the legs are nearly touching or touching, all the way out to Upavista Konasana, which is where the legs are spread out in a wide V. I like for restorative yoga to be in the middle somewhere. So I'm not trying to really, again, I'm going to let the legs relax. So I don't want to try to hold them together, and I also don't want to go to the extremes of my hip joint here. I just want enough of a V that when I fold forward, there's an allowance, right? The pelvis is allowed to move forward. Now, for those of you that have some trickiness with your vertebrae in your back, be very mindful of not rounding the back. Keep the back more upright, and this is where the props really come in handy. because you can kind of build yourself up a little prop mountain, and you might need a lot of pillows for this, or even a chair can be really useful. So if you put a chair in front of you, you can, and a pillow or a blanket on top of the chair for softness, you can kind of build up a little structure so that when you lean forward, you don't round your back at all. And that will let the pelvis do the work here. And so we'll put the work that we want on the glutes and on the hamstrings and on those areas of the body, but we won't necessarily cause trouble for the vertebral discs. Now, if you have healthy discs with no issues, you could allow a rounder shape to happen in your back. And again, this is where you have to know your own body and make good choices for you. So if you are, the rounder shape feels nice, for me it feels nice. It makes the muscles on my back release in a really lovely way. And that is nice. Because I tend to have almost like a permanent cobra going on in my spine because I have a deep lordotic curve. So folding forward and allowing my back to round actually releases a lot of tension for me in this lower back area that's almost always trying to hold me in an extension. So again, you just know your own body and make good choices. And we'll stay with this guy for about 5 more minutes, allowing yourself to have however many props you need. And if you need to come out of the pose at any point, come out of the pose, do some movement, and then if you want, come back in, or just allow yourself to have an opportunity to kind of move creatively in the way that you think you want to. We all want to do things that are appropriate. Now, once we're here and you're settled in with whichever version of the pose you're up to, allow yourself to once again come into awareness of your breath. Again, we're going to do this technique of the inhale moving down into the body and the exhale moving up, but we're going to see if we can feel that in our back body. So for me, the first version that we did, all of the sensation was really directed to the front half or the abdominal side of the body. Now we want to direct this attention to the back, almost as if we're breathing up and down the spine. So there's a downward movement of the inhale and then a lifting or upward movement of the exhale. Just every now and then checking in with yourself and making sure that your eyes are relaxed and your mouth is relaxed. And so those little places where we might not realize we're holding any tension, we just want to keep coming back to those, particularly around the face, the eyes, and the mouth. Sometimes when we concentrate on a breathing technique, we accidentally furrow our brow. So we're just allowing that to come back to smoothness while simultaneously concentrating on that breath. It's fun. It's a unique challenge. another minute or so. Yogis, we're going to take a nice big breath. Let go with a big deep sigh. And then inhale yourself all the way up. And then once you get there, it's nice to kind of lean back and bend your knees. And then you can even do some little, I'm going to try not to hit my head on the credenza. You can do some little windshield vibri moves if you like. Now, the pose that we're going to do next is a twist where we kind of turn and face down onto the props or onto the floor. This is tricky for some of us, some folks. It's a tricky one for me. I'm going to do it today, but I will need a lot of props. But some folks may just find that it's really unpalatable. And if that is the case, then you can either do a simple seated twist, where you simply just turn to one side, or you can do a reclining twist, where you lay on your back and bring the legs over to one side. Both of those are alternatives to this thing that I'm about to show you that we're going to do. So you will essentially sit on one hip, and then turn and lay forward into the twist. And for me, I need to build up a little structure so that that will work. So I will need a block, and I will need a rather robust pillow. And then I also sometimes use a blanket to sort of make room so I don't smash the front of my chest in ways that is uncomfortable. So I prefer to keep my head turned the same direction as my feet, but some people will find that it's quite pleasant to turn the head in the direction of your back. So you can decide once you get there. So essentially you're going to kind of sit on one hip and then turn towards whatever stack of pillows and other things you have at your house. And then you're going to fold yourself forward and let yourself lie down, so that there is a twist in the spine. Now, if you're like me and you've got like a limb that hangs out, on one side my elbow touches the ground, but on this side it doesn't. So I'm going to put my extra yoga block, or extra pillow if I've got one, underneath that elbow. Okay, and then I have my blanket on a diagonal so that it holds my chest, and then I have room for, body parts. And I can also kind of make a little head rest for that. So you just adjust, and I kind of intertwine my legs because that helps make me more stable. You can also just stack the legs one on top of the other. And and then we'll relax into this. And this is another, because this is a pose where we're going to do a left side and a right side, we'll hold this one a little bit less, so we'll stay with this guy for about 4 minutes here. Again, you can substitute the reclining twist or just a simple seated twist in place of this, if this is just too ridiculous. You may find that you need a little blanket or something soft underneath the hip here, because the femur bone has a bump on the side called the greater trochanter, and if that pushes into the floor quite uncomfortably, having something soft under your hip would be nice. I've got 2 rugs and carpeting, so it's feeling pretty good. But if I were on a wooden floor with just a simple rug, or even no rug, just my yoga mat, I might want extra padding there. At this point, you should know if you're just going to be super duper uncomfortable or if you're starting to feel yourself settle. So as long as that sense that you can relax your face and relax your shoulders and let yourself get soft is there, stay with this option. And if you're finding a kind of building fight, you can flip yourself over or do a different pose version. For 1 more minute, but an interesting kind of place to put your awareness in a twist, regardless of the kind of twist that you're up to, is to kind of find the point in the belly where you really feel that twisting action, and to let that become kind of the focus of your meditation, and feel the breath as it moves through that kind of place where the twist really occurs. big breaths here. Now this is where things get a little interesting. So we're going to come out of this pose gently. So if I were laying on my back, I would bring my knees back to the center. If I were doing a seated version, I would simply unwind. And for those of us that are doing this version laying on the belly, we're going to get the arms under us and gently push ourselves back up to sitting. And then as we kind of unwind, we may find that there's still kind of an inclination of the body to twist in the direction that we were twisting. So just noticing that to begin with. But then also continue to breathe into that place where the twist was occurring in the navel area. And as the twist slowly finishes unwinding in the spine, can you feel, or do you feel any change to the sense of spaciousness or the sense of space that the breath has to move through that area? What happens as the spine kind of begins to finish sort of shifting fluid back where it was, there's a sense of freedom for the breath and a sense of kind of spaciousness in that general kind of belly area. A little more of a sense of freedom, and largely I'm experiencing that through the breath having freedom to move, right? So when we twist, one of our lungs goes under a different level of pressure than the other physically. So physically that creates a kind of interesting dynamic or interplay between the two lungs. And then when we let it go, quite often there's this kind of, we can really sense that kind of freedom from that inhibition that the breath was experiencing. And it translates to a kind of interesting, spacious or free feeling, at least for me. I'm willing to accept that it might be different for you. So if you have not yet kind of experienced the full unwinding of your spine, don't go into your other side yet. If you have, then you can kind of set yourself up. Now I'm moving my props all the way around to the other side because my voice pointed at you guys is better than pointed away from you where you really can't hear anything I'm saying. I don't know if you can hear anything I'm saying right now, but hopefully you can. So again, I'm going to just kind of organize my props. So I've got plenty of options. And again, I'm going to sort of sit on the side of my hip here, kind of leaning myself in this direction. And for me, one direction is definitely easier than the other. So I have to make slightly different adjustments on one side than I do on the other. And often we're asymmetric beings, y'all. So we can, we have to make little adjustments going along the way. So you may find that one of your body sides twist a little bit more. I probably have like a really mild scoliosis in my spine that kind of allows for a little less twisting on one side than the other. A lot of us have, like, our spines aren't exactly picture perfect. There's always like little nuances or little muscle tensions that might pull one way or another. So work with what you got, yogis. Without an agenda of fixing anything, just being where we are. And choose the appropriate version of a twist for you. And again, we'll stay with this twist for about 4 minutes or so. Give or taking a few breaths here and there. One of the things that I find really interesting about the twist too is that often the side of, whatever side of is up in the twist, in this case, my left nostril is up. My right nostril cleared out while I was on the other side, and now my left nostril is clearing and opening on this side. So that sense of kind of the nostril shifting or dominance shifting is very interesting. as your pose begins to sort of unfurl, and as your nervous system unwinds, like for me, it helps to sort of start out with my legs really curled in, and then as time goes on, I can kind of stretch them out a little bit more. You may find that like little tiny adjustments can be made along the way as well for you. Or you may find that things that weren't bothering you do start to bother you, and sort of like the princess and the pea, it's appropriate to stick another mattress between you and the lentil, so you might put another blanket down somewhere or adjust for that reason. Halfway through our journey here together on this pose. So again, for our final minute, you might direct the breath to that area where you can first feel the twist in the navel-ish region. And just pay attention to how the breath moves through that location. So we're going to take a nice big breath. Let go with a sigh. And then you're going to gently unwhirl or unrevolve your pose here. Just for a few moments, just let the body kind of unwind on its own. Now, we have one posture left to do, and you get to decide whether you would like that posture to be Shavasana, where you do a supported version with something that kind of helps relieve any pressure from your back. For example, you could put a rolled up blanket or some pillows underneath your legs, and then you might want some support for your head. Some people need a more elevated head position. The other option would be to do an inversion of a sort. So you could do legs up the wall, and if you don't have a wall handy, putting your legs up and over the edge of your couch or over a chair can be an equally restful or even sometimes more restful option in that regard. So I'm going to do Shavasana, but if you would like to and you have the things around you that are necessary for your legs up position, you can certainly do that. We're going to be in that position for it'll be close to 10 minutes by the time we get there, a little less. So just be mindful that whatever you choose to do, you're going to be there a while. so make it as relaxed as possible is basically what I'm getting at, so that you're not fighting either the posture or your body anatomy. So I'm going to use a pillow under my legs and a blanket under my head. And I'm going to have a little lie down. And we spend some time in the final relaxation in restorative, even though everything we've done has been quite relaxed and quite calm. But we allow, again, one more opportunity for there to be the least amount of tug and pull on the body. So with the inversion, again, we want it to be very, very supported and easygoing if we're using that option, which is, it's a good option, just like the wall will help hold us, or the furniture will help hold us, but just putting my legs in the air, not as supported, so that makes my core do work. And what we want to aim for is the least amount of work possible. If a sloth could do a yoga pose, this would be the pose, y'all. And so you can put an eye pillow over your eyes. And if you tend to be in kind of in a way fidgety, and it's not too warm in your house, putting like either a quilt just over your lap, or even over your whole body, a kind of a blanket that has a little bit of weight to it. And if you're inclined to have one of those big weighted blankets that weigh like 15 pounds, even better. But you can place that over your body, and it'll help you feel less fidgety, right? That kind of the weight of it, even just a quilt over the lap, I find, the weight of it is quite soothing. Now, you want to make sure that you've adjusted your body parts so that any weight that you put on you is appropriately distributed. And if you happen, to have a more lordotic low back, it might be helpful again to sort of take a little bit of the flesh from your buttocks and kind of pull it down, so that, because often just, like if you've got junk in your trunk, like this girl, it helps to sort of distribute that a little bit out, in the same way that you kind of distribute like a weighted surface out. You just kind of distribute your own body parts out, and it can help take pressure off your spine. So just make adjustments as you need, and then let yourself, you can put an eye pillow or a blanket over your eyes. Like I use a layer of blanket and just kind of put that over my eyes. If it's winter time and I'm feeling like cuddling up more, I'll use the whole blanket and make like a little pod. But in the summer, I prefer just a single layer. And then let yourself relax. You can even put like little eye pillows, if you have lots of them, you can put little eye pillows in your hands. So the weight of that kind of helps hold your palms to the ground. And like any weight you put on the body can help you feel a little less fidgety. And we're just going to let ourselves disappear into this shape for a while. Rather than, we can certainly start with a breath practice that helps you get centered, but eventually let go of the technique and just be wherever this practice brought you. finding any sort of discomfort, you're always welcome to make little minor adjustments. But allow yourself for just a little bit longer to stay as relaxed as possible. If you find your mind is kind of busy, just bring it back to a sense of feeling the breath, moving into the body, and then lifting back out. Yogis, without moving your body, can you just bring your awareness back to the breath if it's drifted away? Now just imagine the whole body kind of accepting the inhale and releasing the exhale. Next inhale, take that breath in so deep you can't get any more air in. You can feel it all the way down to your tiptoes. And then let it go with a big sigh. And then you can start a little movement pattern. Now if your legs are still up, just start with little fingers and toes movements. Do some little wrist and ankles, and then you'll bend your knees and hang out that way for a little while. And if you're laying on the ground, you can start with some stretching. And then bend your knees and hang out like that for a while. And eventually you're going to want to lay on your side for a little bit. And we're not in a hurry to come right up, so be kind. Take your time. Sometimes I'll take even longer. But let your head be kind of the last thing that comes up as you sit. So thanks for joining me for a restorative yoga practice today. Hopefully it's brought you a kind of sense of sort of letting go of everything that's happened before, and you can start your new week fresh. So thank you for joining me, yogis. Let's take a big breath together. Big deep sigh. Namaste, beautiful souls.